right, so this is SQL Management Studio, and the first thing you're going to find is when you load up SQL Management Studio, it's assumed that your database is running. First of all, that the database engine is running. There's two programs. There's the SQL Server engine itself. It doesn't matter what program you use to talk to it, but it's just a core database program. And then there's SQL Management Studio, which is just a client, right? This is just a client program that can talk to the database engine. Another alternative way is to just use command line and talk to SQL Server that way, right? So the client is whatever you want to use. We're just going to use this because it's like graphical and really easy to use. So first thing you'll see is that you'll see your server name, and this is relevant because you're going to need this in your C# code when you're trying to create a connection string. So if you can't figure out your server name, you can always come back here and copy and paste your server name from here. I just find it really convenient that way. We'll start with Windows authentication. It means just log in with your Windows account or Windows credentials. We're going to change that in a moment. We'll just say connect. And all of these folders should appear, right? Assuming everything went well, you didn't have any issues with logging in, you come to this view over here in Object Explorer. And so data, we'll talk about the different folders, but databases are the relevant ones that we care about. So databases is just like all of your list of databases that you have installed here, that you've added. And within our tables, so if I expand on this, there's the different folders related to the database. So in particular, there's database diagrams if you want to do the visual representation of your database with foreign keys and all of those things. Tables, expand upon that, and all of the tables that you have inside your database will go here. All right. Security is the other one that you might care about, but we're not going to do anything with security. Security will help us verify if a particular user is associated with our database. So I created a user called Jim Gordon. We're going to do that. We're going to do something like that here. And Jim Gordon is associated with this particular database. So we'll come back to this in a moment. We'll create a new database, new table, and so on. The other one that we care about is security. So be careful. There's two securities here. There's one within each database, and there's one within the entire database scope. So if you expand upon security here, if you want to create a new login, it's under logins, right? Different users that you want to add. Now we'll come back to this in a moment. We're going to add a user momentarily. All right, so those are the two main folders that we really care about in this. There's others, they all have like different purposes, but for our intents and purposes in this course, those are the two folders we really care about. So the first thing we're going to do is create a database. So I'm going to expand databases. I'll just right click on databases and I'll say new database and just give it a name. I'm just going to call it prog 32356 flight crew. I already have a flight crew database, so I'm going to put a 2 in front of it. You don't have to, but you're going to need this for the exercise, the next exercise anyway. Yeah, it's the course code. So I can't remember it right now. I almost put the old course code in. You don't have to put the 2 at the end of it. I just already have an open database with that name. All right, I'm just going to create that database. And when we expand upon that, we're going to find that we have all the same folders that we had before. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a new table. So right click on tables, new table, because there's really nothing in there right now. And this comes up. That's not what I wanted. Or is it? Oh, you know what? It's not docking anymore. That's why. That's better. So we have here 3 columns here. So first is the column name, the second is the data type, and the third is just to allow nulls or not allow nulls. So the first column for our exercise next class will be ID, so the row ID. We'll give it a name. We'll give it a data type. It'll just be int, and we're not going to allow nulls. Right. So we have ID, int, not allowing nulls. The next one will be airline. Its data type will be varchar of 50. 50 is fine. Don't allow nulls. Next one is flight num. Varchar of 50. Don't allow nulls. Destination. Varchar of 50. Don't allow nulls. And finally, airplane type. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to specify ID to be the primary key and make it auto increment as well. So there's two things we're doing here. So first thing you know is that next to ID on the left is there's a little gray box. If I right click on that gray box, I do set primary key. So now you should see a little key. If I click away somewhere, there's a little key now next to ID. Right? Now, the other thing we need to do is make it auto increment. I already have the properties window open, but you need to access the property window or just right click on the table. Actually, I think if you go to view, you should find properties here.
You can right click it and say properties.
That too, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. There it is, properties window as well. Right, so but either way, you need to get to the properties window for this table. And it's known as identity column. Identity column, I click on it, hit the drop down, ID. So now that allows it to be auto increment. Now at this point, you can hit save. Now, if you had hit save before doing this, then we're going to run into an issue. But that's okay, we can get around that issue. So first off, I'm going to do Control S to save. But the tricky thing is you got to make sure that you've clicked in this space over here in order to hit save. And then we're going to give this. Now we can give this table a name. I'm going to call it flights. And now flights is saved. Now suppose you had hit save, you gave it a name, but then afterwards you're like, oh, okay, you know what? I need to set the identity column. Right? Suppose you forgot to do that or something. You're going to get an error, right? And that error is basically saying it doesn't allow you to drop and recreate the table. So there's a workaround, and we're going to set that right now so that you don't have headaches in the future. It's under Tools and Options and so under Designers, right? You're going to see this checkbox, prevent saving changes that require table recreation. So uncheck this. So I think it's more for a production environment where they don't want you to drop a table and recreate and potentially lose data. But here, for our learning purposes, you're going to run into a lot of headaches if you try and make a change to that database table. It'll prevent you. Like suppose you want to add a new column, or like I said, just set the identity column because you forgot. So this checkbox needs to be unchecked, right, in order to allow for changes. So getting that out of the way, at least we won't run into any future headaches. All right, let's create one more table. So I'm just going to right click on tables and say new table. And this will be for our users of the system. So first column will be ID. Again, int, don't allow nulls. Second column will be name. It'll be a varchar of 50, don't allow nulls. Next is email, varchar of 50, don't allow nulls again. Address, varchar of 50, don't allow nulls. Age will be an int, don't allow nulls. And flight will be an int, don't allow nulls. So the flight will just be the flight num from the other table. So ideally, we want to create a foreign key constraint to do that, but I'm not.
Flight num also be a varchar 50?
So the flight, we're not going to use the flight num, we're going to use the ID from the other table. Yeah, and link it that way. So yeah, we would want to do a foreign key relationship. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to let that be because I don't want you guys getting stuck on foreign key issues when you're trying to debug the code and stuff. So we'll leave that out for this exercise. But of course, yeah, you can create a foreign key constraint between the two. Now right click on the gray box next to ID, set it as primary key. And since properties is open for me, go to identity column, choose ID for this. You'll notice that now there's 3 options because it's looking for ints, right? So we'll choose ID. And now we can save that table. So clicking back into this view, Control S to save. I'm going to call it users. All right. So at this point, we have 2 tables. Now what we'll do is we'll populate it with some data. All right. So now that we have 2 tables created, we want to populate some data. We just expand tables. Now here, we see the 2 tables. But if you happen to sometimes not see the tables that you've created, you can just hit the refresh button. Right? Anytime you create something and you don't see it in this tree, just hit refresh and it'll refresh everything for you. So starting with flights, I'm going to right click on flights itself and you're going to see a number of options, right? Edit top 200 rows so we can enter 200 rows of data. These numbers can be changed in settings. So we can make it like edit top 1,000 rows, for example, or edit top 1,000 rows. When you want to do a select, in this case, it's select top 1,000 rows. You want to go beyond 1,000, you can do that, right? These numbers can be set inside settings. So first off, I'm just going to hit edit. And you'll see here this window pops up. And sorry, edit. Yeah, so it's edit top 200 rows is what you choose. And then this window should pop up. Now, because ID auto increments, we're not going to set a value for ID. We're just going to hit tab to go to the next one. And airline, we can start with like American Airlines. Flight num will be like AA333. Destination, we'll say London. Airplane will be Airbus A330. Airbus 330. Right? And you hit tab. As you keep tabbing, there were like red circles that you saw. That meant this data was not saved. Right? It wasn't saving the data. So then when I got to the end and I'd finished tabbing, everything was good. There were no issues with what I typed in. So all the red circles went away because it flushed all that data to the database. And you can see for ID, it entered a 1. Sometimes you're going to find, like it's going to do like 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes you might see 1001, 1002, 1000. It's actually just internal. Like whatever the auto number generator is, it's just automatically doing, whatever its most recent number it thinks is correct. Sometimes when we do insert update, when we do like deletes, for example, and so suppose you had like up to 5, right? 1 to 5, and you deleted 3, right? It's not going to replace 3. It's going to do 6. Right? And so don't worry about it. It's just the internal system. It's its way of calculating numbers. So it doesn't go back and say, oh, well, 3's been deleted, so I can reuse a 3. It doesn't work that way. It just keeps going. Right? So don't be alarmed if you ever see that. All right. So next one, let's say skipping the ID, we'll say Air Canada. I'll do like AC792 going to San Francisco. And we'll say its airplane is a Boeing 787. And all the red circles disappeared. So it's good. We'll do next airline WestJet. We'll say like WS633 going to Tokyo on a Boeing 777. And we'll do one more. United Airlines. We'll say UA 255 going to Beijing on an Airbus 380. All right, and you keep going, add as many rows as you want. We'll stop at 4 for our exercise here. And we'll do the same for our users. So now we'll switch over to users and we'll edit top 200 rows. Oh, before we do, if you want to verify that it actually is in there, you can just right click on flights, go select top 1000 rows, and you'll verify that your data is there. All right, so it actually saved. Now let's do the same for users. So edit top 200 rows. And again, we're going to skip the ID. We'll say the first person is Jim Kirk. His email will be jim@kirk.com. Address, we'll say 123 Enterprise Way. Age, let's say 33. I'm going to make up some flight nums, just lining up with the IDs between 1 and 4 that we did on the flight table. It's going to pick like one of those ID numbers and put them here. So, for example, I'll say flight 2, and that'll be the second row from the flights table. All right, so we have, switch to this one, we have flights of 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're just going to reuse those IDs and give each one to a different user. Next one is Bones McCoy. Say bones@doctor.com. We'll say address is 456 Doctor Way or Doctor Street. Age 28. Flight 3. It's that third row. All right, third person will be Spock. And it'll say Spock@Falcon.com. Say 789 Falcon Circle. His age, I don't know, 67. Give him flight number 1. And then finally, Montgomery Scott. We'll say Scotty@engineer.com. Say he's 543 Engineer Drive. Say he's 25. Give him flight number 4. That's good enough. We have 4 users, 4 flights. We can verify the data has been saved by just right-clicking on users and saying select top 1000 rows. We can see here that we have here number of rows. All of the data we entered. So now we have 2 tables. We have populated 2 tables with data. We logged in with Windows authentication, but we don't want to keep logging in with Windows authentication. We want to log in with a user and a user and password. All right. So the thing is that by default, generally by default, in the installation, unless you kind of noticed it in the installation, but chances are you guys didn't, there's 2 settings for authentication. There's Windows mode, which is the default, and there's something called mixed mode authentication, which you create your own user and you log in with that user. So chances are you didn't set mixed mode. So we're going to go ahead and set mixed mode right now. In order to do that, we're going to right click on the very first row up here with our server name / SQL Express. And we're going to go to properties. And the properties window will open. We're going to go to security. Now, I already have it set up, but if you have Windows authentication mode, you want to switch it over to SQL Server and Windows authentication mode. In other versions, in older versions, it might say mixed mode authentication, but either is correct. So we basically want this mode or mixed mode authentication if that's what it reads on your installation. And then you're going to hit OK. And it might complain that you need to restart the engine to get this going. Yeah, so what happens is that to restart it, you don't have to restart your computer, thankfully. What you can do is right click again and look for restart. And it'll give you like a little window. Yeah, we're good. Go ahead. And then this window will pop up again saying, are you sure you want to restart? And I'll hit yes. And this will pop up as well. So now it's restarted. Everything's still there. We can go ahead and create a new user to associate with this database. So at this point, we have our two tables. We now have the capability to log in with a username and password. Now we're going to create that username and password. We do that under security. But again, like I said, be very careful. There's two security folders. There's one within the table. I'm going to minimize the database table. There it is. Yeah. So I minimized the database table, the database itself. So all those folders within the database are hidden. Just so I don't get mixed up, I want to expand this security, right? And one outside the database is the one you want, right? So that's why I minimize the database. And I'm going to expand logins. And I'm going to right click on login and say new login. All right. Now this window pops up. I'm going to choose SQL Server Authentication. And I'm going to give this login a name. Now, because I am so security conscious and so worried someone's going to hack this thing and steal all this important data, I'm going to use a really high quality username, Bob. And I'm going to use a really super secure password called Bob. And I'm going to type in Bob again to verify that this super secure password was indeed entered correctly. For our intents and purposes, I'm going to uncheck enforce password policy because we're learners and we don't want to get into too much headache with having to force ourselves to change our password every X number of months and stuff and have a minimum password type. So I'm going to leave that as unchecked. And then under default database, I'm going to switch it from master to my database. So prog 32356 flight crew. But we're not done yet. Don't hit OK. There's one more thing we got to do. So right now we just created a username and password. We mapped it to our database. We got to give it a role or roles. So we got to go over to server roles and check off what we want. Actually, sorry, user mapping, not server roles, user mapping. So user mapping is going to check off the database again and choose the roles I want. I'm just going to use DB owner. And I think we'll give it full access for this. And now you can hit OK.
This is the only database we're going to be using?
Yeah, for this course. Maybe we'll make another, but I haven't thought that far ahead yet.
Waiting for like
Yeah, exactly. So now we can log out and log back in with this username and password. So I'm just gonna hit so when I want to log out, I mean, you can close the whole thing with the X, but I just want to log out and log back in with this new username and password. So we can hit the little X over here to disconnect. And I'm just gonna hit the button next to it to connect. And that login window will pop up. So this is my login window. All right. Now if I want to log in with my personal username and password, I'm going to switch from Windows authentication to SQL Server authentication. And actually, before I do, just to give you an idea, so you have all these Active Directory login options as well. That kind of gives you the hint that this SQL Management Studio program is not just for local SQL Server installations, but if I had a server somewhere else in the world and I want to log into it, I just provide that server IP address here, right, or domain, and I can go ahead and use my username and password as I need to. So we're just going to log in locally. I also have a username Jim Gordon here, right? But I'm going to use Bob. So username Bob, password Bob. And hit connect. And it looks like I'm in. Now I have two databases. So let's see what happens when I try and access another database with Bob. Like, I try expanding. It's giving me an error because it's not associated with that other database, right? So potentially you could have the one user associated to multiple databases, and back inside server mapping, I would have specified multiple databases there, but I didn't. I only specified one. But if I expand upon the database here, then I have full access, right? I see my tables. I can right-click on flights and do select top 1,000, and the results come in. So this one we have enough to just get started, creating a database, creating some tables, creating a user, log that user, connect that user in, right? And being able to manipulate data and so on. And now from here, the next step here would be to create a C# application and actually try and interact with this database.